All right, I showed 10:01, so let's start the program. Good morning and/or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's KAMIND webinar, Seamless Access to Your Work on Any Device. My name's Mike Klass, and I'm an account manager here at KAMIND. As a reminder, we'll be having one Microsoft webinar, second Thursday, and one CMMC webinar, fourth Thursday of each month to keep you up to date on what's going on. If you have any ideas for future topics, please let me know. Before we get rolling today, a housekeeping item. There will be time for Q&A again, so if you can keep your microphone on mute during the presentation, that would be great. With many of us working from home, we'd like to eliminate most of the background distraction noises. If you have any questions mid-presentation, please feel free to use the chat functionality or the raise hand icon, and we'll be sure to weave the question into the presentation best we can. We will be recording today's webinar, so if you're uncomfortable with this, now would be your opportunity to opt out. Now, with that out of the way, let's get down to business. So, terminal services, Azure Virtual Desktop, and now Cloud PC, kind of the evolution of the remote client. Hopefully on today's webinar, you will learn the technology around the new Microsoft Cloud PC, the difference between AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, and Cloud PC, and a ballpark user on Cloud PC, as well as the benefits Cloud PC can bring to your IT environment. So please sit back and relax, and let's hear our President and CEO, Matt Katzer, talk to us today about seamless access to your work on any device. Please take it away, Matt.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, and thank you for the introduction, Mike. Yeah, this was kind of a fun webinar to put together. In fact, what we're actually doing this entire webinar in terms of my Teams and Teams integration in the presentation is actually from a Cloud PC. So I actually am running a Cloud PC on my desktop, and that's where I have launched the webinar and everything else is. And this is kind of a very, as you see the evolution of Azure Virtual Desktop and how we actually onboard employees, and you look in terms of supply chain disruption and how this all fits together, it's really is a super solution. And we use it for ourselves when we actually onboard a lot of contractors, because we have an ability to basically give them a controlled environment, which we manage and everything else associated with it. So what we'll do is a little bit about, for those who don't know us, is we're KAMIND IT. We're the, in terms of what we've done in Office 365, we sold over 280,000 copies of our books of getting on Office 365 and securing it. And we're also one of the 20 companies in the US that actually provide the high-end Department of Defense security subscriptions. So we actually provide subscriptions to both of the DoD environment for the defense contractors, and also for in terms of the commercial environment. And we're very much about security in everything that we do. And as we go through the process, as you look at what we're doing at KAMIND, we really have our core mission is that we exist to prevent and solve big problems. And with the pieces and everything else that we have, one of the problems that we were running into is, how do you actually onboard contractors? How do you onboard remote workers? How do you actually provide them hardware and everything else? And so a lot of our deployments, for instance, we use Autopilot and Intune, and even our Cloud PC here is a Intune managed device. And we basically, how we auto provision things is the way it works, because you want to have a zero touch mentality. And that's about how we look at it. And that's what we really do. And when you look in terms of what's really happened, in terms of what the evolution of the marketplace, what really has gone on in terms of users and everything else, there's just been a lot of change. And so a lot of people have gone to traditional remote terminal services desktop. They basically are using VPN tunnels to access things, and they're basically trying to control a lot of pieces. And what we're finding in terms of a lot of organizations that have a legacy VPN infrastructure, they're really questioning, what do we need to do? How can they actually build that infrastructure in Azure? How can they actually do what we have here, use a virtual environment where they actually have all the necessary security policies and controls in place from day one, and how to provision those things. And really, that's what we're really looking at, is how things are changing the way we work. And it's even looked through the way you worked for 2 years ago before COVID, what you're doing now, and how you have just changed what you have done. And that's what we're really seeing. And basically, traditionally, when you spin up a terminal servers, you do a Citrix or some environment, it's just a very super complex. And it basically creates a environment that where there's a lot of checks and where there's a lot of blockers. And what people need to do, like we get a request, you want to spin up a virtual desktop, spin it up immediately. Those are the type of things that you actually need to do. And that's what we actually have. So basically, that's the type of capabilities that you're actually looking for that we actually have with iCloud PC. Now, I have this slide. Some of you may have seen it before, but the main change is what you're seeing is how we actually talk about security. And the reason why I mention this is that when you think about Cloud PC, it's built secure from day one. So traditionally in the old world, when you had legacy VPN solutions, you're using a legacy RDS solution to a terminal server, security was always that bolt on to that pillar to keep that building on top standing. Now what happens, security is foundational. Now, I like this slide because it's really graphically shows what's the infrastructure, what has changed. And if you see what's going on in terms of Cloud PC, security is infrastructure to the basis of it. Like the Cloud PC that I'm using here, it's basically managed by Intune. So it has all the necessary endpoint policies in place, all the necessary e-discovery pieces in place that are just built in from day one with almost zero IT configuration. And that's really the key part of this. So when you talk about pieces like Azure Virtual Desktop and Cloud PCs, they all are available for different types of workloads depending on what your business wants to do. So Azure Virtual Desktops, for instance, is really set up to more of an app virtualization service in the cloud. So you have a shared line of business apps that you go through across multiple users. You actually look at it from a cost standpoint. How do you actually do data entry? How do you actually share the pool resource? Versus the Cloud PCs is a dedicated resource. Now with Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop, you can have pooled resources and shared resources. So they have best of both worlds depending on what the controls. But a lot of that was mostly due for legacy line of business apps that they actually had in place. So when you look at the place and with Azure Virtual Desktop that Microsoft implemented and that we have with Cloud PC, the same type of things, end-to-end security, simplified management, and really trying to give you that remote modern experience. Like the one I'm running on right now is actually a Windows 11. It's up to date, has all the latest security fixes and everything else. And I have my Azure environment, which we hosted like a line of business app for QuickBooks. Everybody in the world would try to get rid of QuickBooks, but it's one of those legacy apps that just keeps on giving, as they say. So we constantly actually use it. So we use Azure Virtual Desktop in our case because we have a shared environment that we have QuickBooks on. And so when you start looking at what you want to actually run your environment, you're trying to look at it from different views. Like big thing is cost. When you do a Azure Virtual Desktop environment, it's basically a consumption cost. Now, if you're on an Azure virtual machine for more than 11 or 12 hours, then what happens is you're at the crossover point where you actually do a dedicated Windows 365 or Cloud PC. And so but it really depends what the workload you're trying to run and how the configuration, because one device, but it's really trying to have it any way that you want to have it. It's about maximizing productivity. So, and the end-to-end security, like I said, is really crucial. Azure Virtual Desktop as well as Cloud PC, they're managed through Microsoft Endpoint Manager. They can scale through Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and you can provision environments for them. So you have 100% control, which is totally a different approach that you've seen from earlier days. You typically had to go build your custom image. Now you use Cloud PCs and just kind of do the necessary configuration. But that's how you actually have it. And the other aspect of it, which you both have in terms of Cloud PCs and Azure Virtual Desktop, is the remote experience, because how you're remoting into the environment is not using there's no open ports in either Cloud PC or Azure Virtual Desktop. There actually is a proxy-oriented methodology. So you actually have to request access into it. And then when you get access into Cloud PC, for instance, You're going to, if you have necessary MFA built into your 365 tenant, some of the other challenges, you're going to be prompted for those. Just like if you actually build in the conditional access security to actually manage your infrastructure, those rules are in place for Cloud PC. So everything that you've done, you've kind of built the environment in your organization for 365, and Cloud PCs is just another tool into it. So as an IT administrator, you don't have to go deploy yet another, MFA model, or yet another set of FIDO tokens, or yet another set of basically services you need put in place because you have a new environment. You're, in essence, Cloud PC is basically a subset in that environment that you're going to. And that's what really crucial on this whole stuff, because it comes down to how much time do you spend on managing it. And we're all super, super busy. So what you want to do is you want to have solutions that you can actually pick and easily scale. And that's what you have with Cloud PC. And that's kind of the key pieces and everything else. And so when you actually start looking at it from a user standpoint, you're trying to figure out how to match those types of work environments that a user has and how to manage the work styles that people want to use. You may have users that want to run like everything on Chromebooks and access the environment, but have a fully function Cloud PC. Sort of like, the PC that I'm actually running with is which is a 16 gig PC that I have running this presentation with 4 CPU cores. And you can have different environments. So it really comes down to what makes sense. And that's what's really crucial, because you got to match the workload and the device platform to the user. Now, from an IT administrator, you can actually get out of the whole provisioning model of remote employee of they can bring their own equipment, provision them a Cloud PC, so you no longer have to provide the equipment to them. Or, it's you may have a different model, but it's about trying to simplify the administration. And with a Cloud PC, it runs like any Intune devices. So if you want to block all the USB ports, you want to block the configuration, allow things not to be copy or pasted, all those controls exist. And we deploy a lot of that in terms of our CMC level 2, which is really the NIST 800 171 security protocols. It's about protecting user data. So you have all that capability to do it. It's just trying to figure out what makes sense. So you really have, two solutions when you start doing virtualization. You got the Windows 365 Cloud PC, and you got the Azure Virtual Desktop. And it really comes down to how do you want to use them. Windows 365 Cloud PC is a dedicated PC in the cloud that is basically provisioned and is charged a fixed monthly rate, where Azure Virtual Desktop is really designed for line of business application, a shared experience, but also is based on consumption. So it's use it or lose it. It's how the users use the environment. So when you look at these things, when you look at these two options, the questions you ask is, what are our options? What really makes sense? And that's really crucial on this. So to get you a little idea what's in it, and from an architecture standpoint, it's really you step back and you say, okay, now I want to look at Azure Virtual Desktop. And you'll see what we see in terms of the configuration. Now, this is not a legacy environment. This is in modern Azure Virtual Desktop. So what Microsoft does is actually provide the management, this middle picture of the virtual desktop. That's all Microsoft managed in terms of the gateway access, the broker, all that technology that you use to basically take clients and map them to an application. Once everything is actually in place, in terms on the far right side, in the Azure VM services, this is where your custom applications actually exist, and that's where the line of business. So you have Azure Virtual Desktop, it gives you that shared experience. And you can have dedicated workstations, and you can have shared line of business. But a lot of folks don't have shared line of business. We're going to SaaS services now. And so you're trying to figure out, what type of infrastructure do you really need? So you start looking at things that beyond, how do I actually improve the productivity of the organization? And even from a standpoint, you can look at, using something like Azure Virtual Desktop and Cloud PC as a disaster recovery service as well. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility and options that you actually have. And one of them, for instance, when you look at Cloud PC from an architecture standpoint, it's a Windows 10 or a Windows 11 PC in the cloud. That's pretty much what it is. Like mine, I say right at the top, you can see this. Mine says it's a, I have a cloud, I have a business version, but mine's a 4 CPU with 16 gigs and about 128 gig of disk. And the reason why I don't need that many, such a large disk on these things, because I actually use OneDrive. And OneDrive that I'm syncing to my desktop is syncing to the cloud. My Outlook is syncing. So in essence, data is basically synced all over the place. So if you have a situation where you have a total disaster, all the laptops are lost, the equipment's lost, you have your employee working at home, they can't get to the building. How do they actually get it? Well, you can actually easily, quickly spin up a Cloud PC, give them access, and have them go log in. That would automatically configure their environment for them to meet the goals. That's the type of stuff that you actually have. And then when you look at the life cycle with Cloud PC, I thought this was really interesting because it really goes in these 5 steps. You provision, a Cloud PC, you configure it. Basically, the configuration is done from Intune on your organization infrastructure. That's your configuration. So what you do for a desktop or a laptop is going to be the same thing you do for a Cloud PC. It's just another device. You put the necessary protection pieces into it. You monitor with the security. And when it's not being used, you deprovision it. That's the lifestyle that you actually have. And that's kind of the way the Cloud PC works. And the difference, because we talked a lot about AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, and Cloud PC, I try to put some, really simple ways to really understand it. Cloud PC is a persistent virtual desktop. That means it's always on. So that if you go through and you have a Word document open and you basically go shut down your computer, you come back the next day, that Word document is still open in the same spot in the cloud. So it doesn't matter if you're actually logging in from home or logging anywhere, everything's all consistent. And the other aspect of it is it really ends up having this other, what I call the cool feature. When you do the enterprise version, it's managed by Microsoft Endpoint Manager, just like any other device you have in Intune. And you start looking through the pieces of it, you're looking at ways to actually improve the security organization that gives you the capabilities. Where AVD is really designed for multi-session. Yeah, you can have dedicated, what we call dedicated VMs, which is basically a Cloud PC, or you can have pooled resources. And again, the AVD is fully customizable. It can be dedicated like Cloud PC or pooled, like I said earlier. And the desktop is also managed by Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And it's designed to really share the line of business applications. So you see the different environments and how you scale it. The key thing in both cases, you notice that it's managed by Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And that gives you the ability to manage any device. So you're managing it no different than you would actually manage any hardware in your environment. Now, there's 2 versions of Cloud PC. One of them is what we call the business version, and one of them is the enterprise version. And the main difference is that the enterprise version is managed through Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and the business version is not. And that's kind of the important to really look at to see that and really understand it. In price-wise, they're about the same, and you really pick the price point that you actually need to make sense. And you actually kind of structure your selection around that model. When you look at the cost of various types of things, you have a variety range of costs that you have associated with these. So you can actually go through a 1 or 2. I'm using this 4 CPU version right now. That's the experience that I actually have. But you can use smaller ones and everything else. Let's say I'm doing a data collection that I need a Windows PC for data collection. Sometimes you actually have to spin up those Windows PCs for those legacy apps, and you have to have a dedicated app that runs 24/7. You use these low-end 1 CPU where they're not really, they just collect data and update it and send a couple emails out. And keep in mind the way Cloud PC is structured, it's really designed around Office 365, and it's basically have all the features associated with it. So it's really kind of, you give a best of both worlds on some of the pieces. Now, you can look from a cost standpoint, you can see how the scale is from anywhere from $20 to $162, depending on what the resource is. Now you look in terms of, okay, I can provision a contractor with a laptop. The contractor is going to be there for, for 6 months. And then it's basically they need certain types of resources. And suddenly you have the expense of sending a laptop, you got to fax out to them, get that device out to the user. Now you have to go manage the hardware associated with it. And by the time you look at it, you got $2,000 expense just in that, not including about the labor that you have, where you can look at an environment where you can say, okay, what type of experience do I want the user to have? Give them a 365 account, configure a Cloud PC. And if there is a vendor that already has a 365 account, you basically configure a B2B or a business-to-business account so you can actually have tighter granular control. And you actually manage the environment, you can reduce your costs. So configuring a Cloud PC, even taking this high one at $162 a month, you can look at saying, if I have a contractor for 6 months, and you look at it for, 6 months at $162, that's less than $1,000 versus $2,000 or $3,000 of sending them a laptop and manage it, where you have a BYOB, bring your own devices scenario, and you have complete manage of the data. That's what this is all about. Now on the wizard, let me go chalk the wizards. Let me get out of the screen share mode for a second and then bring up the wizard. So you can see this is my desktop you're seeing in the back. These are all my drives and folders that are synced. Here's my Teams. I'm running Teams on the desktop itself, which makes it really good. And then what I want to do is let's just bring up this configuration wizard right here. And as you can see this is then the URL. If Mike, you can put the URL in the chat session for everyone. But basically, when you look at it, you have two choices. You can talk about if you want a business PC, these are non-managed virtual PCs, and you have this concept of hybrid environment. So if you're hybrid means that, i.e., are you coming from a Windows 10 or a Windows 11 device? If you say yes, then you get a discount in terms of licenses. Then you can actually say, okay, now what I want to have a 4 CPU experience, how much memory do I want to have into it, 16 gigs, and you get an idea of the costs and everything else associated with it. And then if you don't have a hybrid, you can see what the difference is and how the costs range on it. Now on the enterprise side, you find that the prices are very similar. So like enterprise, in case of a 4 CPU, 16 gig that actually running, it's running $66. So you see some of the capabilities. And now if you see, I can actually manage this whole device from Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So as you go through and you look at your organization, you're trying to optimize things, deploy Intune, you're trying to put the necessary policies in place. We have a bunch of compliance rules that are being put in place to make sure how we manage data, how we manage people's property and everything else. You actually get in a situation where you're going to use a Microsoft Endpoint Manager to do that functionality. And now you're going to have the same capabilities to actually go manage Cloud PC. There's no difference. That's the type of things that you actually have when you actually look in the environment and you want to see how the pieces flow together. And as you go through, as we go back to where we were in the presentation, you see I'm running this no different than I would be running my desktop presentation. I figured this would be the best way to give you a demo, is to use it, because it is just like your desktop and there's no other way to actually describe it. And so it gives you an idea of the pieces and how things actually put together on it. And the other thing to mention is Cloud PCs is a fixed monthly cost, where Azure Virtual Desktop is a variable cost. And that's really, as you look at how the configuration, that's really key. So anyway, there's a URL for you so you can actually go see the different pricing models. It's pretty straightforward. And it's on a month-to-month basis. And for you to provision it, just contact us and we'll have some information at the end, and we can easily add it in your subscriptions. Now, the way Cloud PC is actually set up, we talked about the hybrid. It's actually billed to your Azure subscriptions. So that's why everyone has Azure subscriptions. We have a way to actually add them to your tenant. And in order to, the way it's actually used to get discounts on hybrid, there's some rules where basically you got to access at least once a term to get certain discounts in place. But Windows Business, which is really designed for small users, it doesn't have any integration endpoint. Realistically, once you actually deploy Intune, or if you're running Business Premium, you want to do the enterprise version because you want the integration for everything in place. So the question again, we talked over and over, but how do you manage Cloud PC? Well, I mean, how you manage it, use Endpoint Manager. So that's basically what it is. You go to endpoint.microsoft.com in your 365 tenant, and you go manage the environment. And then you can actually go through and see the different devices by just clicking on the devices, for instance. You can actually go through and see the Windows 365 devices and what they're and how to actually manage. So you can actually go through, and in this case, we're showing about how to do point-in-time restore settings. So you can do your normal backups and everything else on top, and you have the restore points and take advantage of the cloud. So you have capabilities that you have to do those type of features, allow you to do necessary parts of it. Now, in enterprise environments, you also have other things that you need to do as well. So when you look at the your environment, you're trying to figure out what is the best way to actually, do manage of the backups and the times. Like in this case, I can restore a Cloud PC. What is the snapshots that I want to take? Very similar to what you're going to do on a Windows 10 or 11 device. And then also from a standpoint, one of the things that I like is the ability to resize the Cloud PC you're using. So you could actually go through and select a set of Cloud PC small side, but you have a big project, so you want to go step up the performance and go to a 16 CPU one of those the high-end Cloud PCs at $160 to $200 a month, and use that for a small period of time till you complete that project and manually step it down. And that's no different than you're going to do in a lot of other services when you use Azure, because you're going to try to dynamically manage the resources. So with the Cloud PC, one of the big things that I was in, one of my big asks was this whole ability, because I want to basically pick in terms of the resources I want to use, but I don't want to lose my data. And I may also go on, like case, I might go on vacation or so, and I may just go through and say, I had a faster during the work, like I'm running a 4 CPU, may I step it down to a 2 CPU one? And you can have different options like that.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
We have a question that actually fits this part of the presentation very well. And the question is, does this support multiple monitors, Cloud PC?
Yes, it does. And on this, you can actually put multiple monitors and display on it. It's very similar to the way Azure Virtual Desktop does. And this particular one, I was going to have a multi-monitor set up in this one. I don't have the configured on it. There's a little, it's the detection that's all built into it. Now, also what's going to happen is Microsoft is going to have different versions of Cloud PCs. These are all more the commercial versions. So you can actually have the high-end graphic Cloud PCs. So you can actually provision Cloud PC with a GPU. So if you're doing graphics and rendering for your environment, you'll have that ability very shortly as well.
Great.
So in terms of like the other capabilities you have on Cloud PC, and that's why this is all new too. When we talk about like in the government cloud, we do a lot in terms of Azure Gov and what's going on in terms of GCC High, and there's a big place as we start building out, we call the, on the defense industrial base contractors, they need to build enclave in GCC High. Well, there's two ways to build an enclave. If you have a line of business app, you're going to do it that way with a line of business app, or you're going to actually put a level 2 enclave with Cloud PC with all the necessary controls on it, and basically cut down your expense, because you're all about trying to figure out how the best way to actually manage this whole environment. Now, when you actually talk about environments in terms of Azure Gov or even local, one of the big issues that we all face, and we're actually addressing one of these things with another one, our client, is e-discovery. What happens if you get a document? How do you do document examination? How do you do document capturing? How do you actually capture that Cloud PC? Well, the same capabilities that you would have to do on a desktop, you have in Cloud PC. So you have the ability to actually with OneDrive to track all the data, and you have the also in the do e-discovery against the image itself. So you can actually go through and set up a image and put a whole Cloud PC under a review from this in a storage account and basically look in terms of access. Now, when you do review from a discovery, you have an interesting option here, which is different than you've seen a lot before. You can actually block the access from the individual working on the device, so you can have exclusive control if you actually need to actually review for any discovery. Now, Microsoft is rolling a bunch of other functionality out as well, but it really, one of the other pieces that I have, when you actually played with the Intune analytics, you start actually picking up some of the other capabilities. Just like you run the Microsoft antivirus, for instance, you can actually do live IDs. So you can be an administrator somewhere else in the country and basically interacting with the user in terms of running PowerShells, running different types of script, correcting data. You can do the same thing doing the with the endpoint analytics and basically collecting information about how to actually manage the environment. So it's all based on Endpoint Manager. So it gives an idea so you can actually see what's going on. Like one of the comments we had, one of the comments we had from one of our clients, for instance, they like to see, okay, what is the performance? How is the user using it? So why we need, so you may actually go through and find out that you oversubscribe a user to a particular version and you want to actually select another one and actually down level it. And that's why you use the analytics to manage it through the Endpoint Manager. So those are kind of the capabilities and everything else. And the question we have from a lot of folks, what is the best way to proceed? Now, keep in mind, Cloud PC is a month-to-month term. So it's very easy to basically spin something up and really select something and go back to this other Cloud PC in terms of the pricing. It's really looking and say, hey, you want to experiment one, you either want a business one or an enterprise and get a general idea. And that's how you actually just provision it. And it's assign it to a user, just like you assign any other license. And those things we can provision for you, very simple, and it's billed to your Azure. It's billed to your Azure consumption. So what is the next steps that you need to do? Well, the logical one is, you got to send some of our other webinars that we actually have in terms of, we're doing one in CMC and also about spending on Azure coming up in July. But also, I think the key one that you want to actually have is just give us a call and let us add a Cloud PC to your tenant. We gave you the link in terms of which link to use to go figure out which one you want to actually try with. And you can manage it from the Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And if you haven't had some of the Intune and Autopilot configurations in place, give us a call, talk to Ozzy or Mike, and give us a shout and let us help you today. So also we're doing a raffle for a gift. So if you can actually look at the feedback and give us feedback in the presentation, but also what other information you want to see. And I want to leave you with one point. If you see it in this blue Cloud PC is a fixed monthly fee. So it's literally, you pick which performance that you want to have and select it, and that's what you actually get charged for and processed. So with that, what I'll do is I'm going to pass it over to Mike and see what questions we have.
Great, Matt. Thank you very much. So let me start off the questions. Whether you buy the business version or the enterprise version, the Cloud PC, does it come with a 365 license or is that a separate add-on?
It doesn't come with a 365 license. What happens is that in order to actually access the Cloud PC, you're going to have probably a 365 account. So the minimum that people are going to have is probably Business Basic. That doesn't have the Office software, and then it's just adding the Cloud PC is what you get to it. What Cloud PC is a virtual Windows 10, 11 desktop. And in order to license it, way Microsoft handles it, they give you a license grant. And the license grant is actually tied to the Microsoft 365 suites. 365 Business Basic, 365 Standard, Microsoft 365 Business Premium, the Microsoft 365 F3, and so on. That's where the license grants are.
Thank you. So I see this as fitting in two different places really well. Matt had mentioned the bring your own device to work. I think it's a great match for that, for controlling your data. And also, if somebody has an older laptop, maybe 6 years old, it's still a good laptop and it still works well, but maybe it has a older microprocessor in it and it's not quite as fast as they want. It's a good solution for that kind of, environment as well. Save you a little bit of money. Maybe you don't have to refresh the laptops every 3 years using a Cloud PC. So maybe a cost saver in the long run.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point, because when you actually have, let's say you have a business premium subscription or or one of the other Microsoft subscriptions, and you add the Endpoint Manager P2, that P2 subscription can run on your phones for the antivirus and antivirus and kind of a threat detection on the device. It can run on that legacy laptop. It runs in Cloud PC. So you talk about all these things when you look at the Microsoft license grant. For a user, you can actually go through and have a Cloud PC, have a legacy piece of hardware, have your phones and have your iPads and Chromebooks, and actually have an environment where basically you have everything protected and you're just charged one license fee for it, plus the consumption for the Cloud PC for which one you want to use.
Yep. And I don't know if you guys all caught it or not on the one slide, but client supported Windows, Android, iOS, so all the major platforms out there today. Anyways, I want to open it up. Anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Please unmute yourself or feel free to use the chat. Looks like a question coming in here. Is there a SKU part number that supports GPU?
The GPU one hasn't been released yet, but there'll be another option for it. And that's supposed to be, I think they're officially announcing it in July at Microsoft Inspire conference.
So basically for higher end, like engineering CAD/CAM applications that need some graphics processing, they'll have different SKUs for different horsepower for the GPU.
Correct. And then you actually start looking at those is with the new graphics protocols. So as we're talking about GPU for the rendering, but also is going to be the bit transmission to the desktop. So you can actually pair it up with the right graphics card. Those are the type of things you have to really look at the environment. So you can actually literally have an engineering workstation with whatever size that you want to have with it, and basically be able to transact it. Now you can, if you wanted to, you can actually have 256 processors, tons of super fast disk, and Microsoft would love to take a check from you at $20,000 a month for those things, or you can do a Cloud PC with reasonable in terms of what type of process you want to use.
Great question, Brian. That comes up a lot when we're dealing with Azure Virtual Desktop accounts. A lot of them are running engineering applications, and we need to beef up the GPU capabilities. Good question. Anything else? All right. Well, going once, going twice. I'd like to mention again our next CMMC webinar on June 23rd, 2 weeks away. We're actually going to have the big dog, the CEO of FutureFeed, Mark Berman, online with us talking about their GRC, Governance, Risk, and Compliance tool. It's a software as a service model. And you don't really need to be a CMMC house to use it. If you're just trying to hit NIST 800, 171 for other reasons, it's a great go-to.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike, because one of the issues that we're all going to face is within probably 18 months, there are going to be mandatory compliance requirements placed on all of us. And as the businesses, we're going to have to figure out how you want to actually, where do you want to centralize that information for assessors to get access to it? And as you get some of the pieces, that's why we're heavily invested in CMMC, for instance, because what CMMC is all about, especially level one, the lower ones, it's about protection of the data. And if you look from our business, that's what we all care about, and it's how do you protect the data. And we're seeing a lot of requirements from insurance companies. So when you actually look for a cyber liability, now they just not only want you to attest that you have MFA deployed, they want to see the object evidence of you doing that stuff and have it deployed. Plus, they want to see your maturity processes and procedures for that. And that's become, and you'll find more of this in about 18 months and probably the tail end 23 and 24. You're going to have your ducks lined up and put everything together. That's how how vicious things are changing. Because the insurance company wrote too many checks, and so they're trying to find a way out of it.
All right, guys. Well, again, we appreciate your time today. We look forward to seeing you at another KAMIND webinar in the future. And there on your screen, www.kamind.com/feedback. Please give us your feedback, and you will be registered for a raffle gift. Anyways, see you next time. Look forward to it. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.